I'm here with Jonathan, co-creator of this TRIBEcast.
Bonjour, Mitchell, Anthony.
Salut. As I mentioned, my name is Mitchell, and we have a few guests with us here today. We have Simon.
Hi.
And Justyna.
Hello.
And AMERO.
Hey.
Who's also going to play a song to start. The topic today is about consent, triggers, trauma, healing, safe spaces, personal responsibility. So that's a content warning to the listeners out there that this might touch your triggers.
Yeah.
So let's start with
this. You want to frame it a little bit, just where the inspiration came
Sure,
from
yes. My friend Katie May, shout out to Katie May, I hope you're listening, wrote something on Facebook the other day, and this is a topic that always has been, or for the past while, has been very important to me to how to bridge this, and this was very inspiring to have this as the topic of our conversation. Mm-hmm. So she says, I've been thinking a lot about consent lately. I'm pretty much obsessed. I've been wondering, how can I express my desires and speak my truth without unintentionally violating people? The vast majority of consent violations are unintentional, and it's up to all of us to make sure we're actively cultivating consent, myself included. And lately, I've been wanting to share more about sexuality and my relationship with my body, but I know this stuff is triggering for people, and not everyone wants to see my naked ass. I also know this stuff is incredibly valuable for a lot of people, and a lot of healing has been inspired by the things people post and see on social media. So, how to get consent? It would be simple if I did what every writing and social media coach ever has told me to do. Pick one topic and stick to it. That way people know what they can expect from you and choose to follow. But I refuse to niche down. I've tried, but it limits me. From now on, I'm not narrowing down, I'm expanding up. I want to share about sexuality and menstruation and food sustainability and conscious relationships and regenerative purpose and all my feelings and whatever the fuck else I can feel whatever the fuck else I feel could contribute to the paradigm shift.
Aho.
So she has started a page, Katie Mazing. If anybody wants to follow, I'm still reading from her there. Yeah. So she said, I'm going to try this for the rest of 19 and see how it goes. If it turns out to be a whole bunch of extra work, I'm going to forget it, and anyone who doesn't want to hear about my yoni can unfollow my page. So one response to this, listening carefully, because I think the words are dense enough to have to pay attention. He says, your question seemingly violates the boundaries of the person asking it by making them the super adult who must mind read and triple decode the nonverbal signals and body language of another, quote, adult child who is not sufficiently psychologically or morally mature enough to take responsibility for their own actions.
Whoa.
As the concept of free speech involves an implicit concept of normative discomfort tolerance, or an ability to self-soothe, so too the notions of adult consent implies people who can handle some emotional intensity and attempts at persuasion without interpreting coercion and violence as broadly as humanly possible.
Interesting, but a bit blaming.
And that's what we're here to talk about today.
Yeah.
And I kind of undid that. I made it bigger and a little bit more specific, because again, those words were dense, and I'm glad you heard and understood it. And I think I'd like to start with my response to that after your song. So we're going to listen to you first, we're going to do this, and after that we can get into it, and already the fact that we're talking about this is already bringing things up, so it'll be easy, I think, to get into this conversation.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So AMERO, mic's off to you.
Under silence, under pressure. Yet the guitar been the man, try been the woman. I got the metaphysical realm easy. Eternal life rings clearer to me, but not to you, so you push your physical on me. Thrust it in when I'm on willingly. Woman aside, full on worldwide. This millennia, lucky was born a guy. That's why y'all misuse your hands and pose away like it's the only one. And that's why y'all misuse your hands and pose away like it's the only one. From Africa to Canada, you didn't want a choice, and that's where you control, so you didn't have to. You man acting out, job boy, you could do better, but why bother? Try being scorned on your intellectual. When bored with the current conversation level, trying ain't being able to walk down the streets without man eating up till you feel no clean. Try being reproduced or being female when it's only your fear of being less male. You man acting out, job boy, you could do better, but why bother? But you don't get it, we got nothing with it. To do is just do that, cannot control your body, fool. But you don't get it, we got nothing with it. To do is just do that, cannot control your being, fool. Under silence, under pressure. Get the guitar in the man, that's a self-imposed band. This violence without of your own hand. Patriarchy for everyone, a better sense. So stop blaming it on the female. Her being pretty is not against you. So stop blaming it on the female. Her not wanting is not against you. You want it, but she owns nothing to you. You mad cause your hormones are pushing through. But you don't get it, we got nothing with it. To do is just do that, cannot control your body, fool. But you don't get it, we got nothing with it. To do is just do that, cannot control your being, fool. Now you taking it out on me, you blame your exterior, feeling superior when it's only your interior. Break the mirror, just like the hormones with emotions and emotions with your ego. With entitlement, get mixed signals. Your anger is the most valuable, but that's just a male with convention, you know. You allowed, but not on me allowed. BP power, pay for all of it. Now you don't wanna hear nothing of this shit, even though you're still suffering from it. You don't wanna hear nothing of this shit. So imagine if you had to slip. You ain't got no black queen, you ain't got no smaller place. You don't have to be sexually just to get up the pulley, the pulley, the pulley, the pulley, the pulley. But you don't get it, we got nothing with it. To do is just do that, cannot control your body, fool. But you don't get it, we got nothing with it. To do is just do that, cannot control your being, fool. You ain't got no black way, you ain't got no smiley face. You don't have to be sexually just to get up the pulley. You ain't got no black way, you ain't got no smiley face. You don't have to be sexually just to get up the pulley.
Yeah.
Merci.
Thank you, AMERO. That was great.
You're welcome. My pleasure, I think.
I'm glad we've got that on tape, so I'm able to listen to it again.
Uh-huh. It's really bouncy, eh? It's kind of.
It's bouncy shit.
like-
Yeah, very
it's
groovy,
good.
I like
think
it.
You gotta dance.
You can
Yeah.
hear that in the club.
Yeah.
Almost. It's like
Such a vibe
popular
to it.
education.
Like, rhythm. I was like dancing all around.
Yeah,
Oh,
very
great.
good. That's the effect I want. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Nice.
Can I say something about this song actually on that?
Yes, please do.
Actually, I really wanted to, people who are concerned with all this crap that I'm denouncing, to really liberate themselves in this dance ritual. So it's really that. So I've actually been told it's really weird because it's really heavy subject, but you're dancing to it. And it's kind of like,
Emotional release.
yeah. It's catharsis? I don't know how to say it.
Uh-huh.
Releasing it. Which I think ties in really well to the idea of taking responsibility for it in a certain way. Is like, okay, there's this trauma, and you know, how do I deal with that? Well, one way is to bring this to the world and be like, okay, well, dance with it.
Yeah, it's kind of way, it's a means of surviving.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like, you know,
You're
what do you
stuck
do with
with
it?
So
Exactly.
what do you do?
Exactly.
Mm.
Yeah.
What do you do when energy is stagnant? You know? It
Yeah.
just needs to move back again.
And
It needs
that's
to kind
right.
of crack the shell to make it move again, right?
Yeah, and I think it has, I mean, this particular subject has a lot to do with injustice. I think it's very hard to kind of like, you know, in French, the right word is subir, you know, and like in English there's undergoing, but so like to
Subir,
to subire, you know, and like to really undergo this thing, you don't want it, it happens, and then your life is absolutely, completely, hey, I'm not gonna shy away from words, destroyed by it, and then how do you deal with it because you still kind of survive because that's how strong you are. So how do you deal with it because you kind of want to have your own fucking life back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it kind of brings up something to me about the drama triangle, that the victim cannot stay in this posture if it wants to heal, if he or she wants to heal, right? Kind of has to elevate herself or himself to kind of bring back that power. Like when we talk about somebody that has lived an aggression, let's say, it's like alienating a part of himself or herself.
Yeah.
And I feel well, that's something, an idea I want to throw out there to see how you guys react to it. But
do you want to talk about what that triangle is? Because now you're talking about one specific part of it. Would you tell the...
Well, en français, disons, c'est le triangle de la victime, du bourreau et du sauveur. And they're really like roles, right? So one individual person can play those three roles even in an hour, in a couple minutes, you know, so it can switch. It's really an energy, a posture, and they kind of feed each other, right? And it kind of drags, well, from my experience, I've experienced, before knowing that triangle, I experienced it, right? With my ex-partner, if you will. Et c'est vraiment, ça nous tire vers le bas. It kind of drags us to our lower selves. We play these roles, which is not really us. It's like all of our construct, all of our individuality or personality, and it kind of stick to our skin, you know, at some point. I don't know what you guys have to say about this.
So I feel like this year has been a year of like going from victim to victor for me.
From victim to?
From victim to victor.
Uh-huh.
And there's a book I picked up like maybe 7 years ago, or even longer than that, from a friend of mine, but I wasn't ready to read it. Sometimes you're not ready in your life. And the book is called Radical Forgiveness. And it's all about that, like, the victim thing. And so, for me, I wasn't ready to read it then, but this year was the year that I was pushed over the edge. And I was like, yeah, I'm ready because I've hit my low. You know, but from that low is where I needed to start. Like, I feel like it happened for me, not to me. And when I saw it from that perspective, I went from victim to victor. And I said, this happened because sometimes your biggest scar is also your biggest healing. Yeah. So, you know, like, that's where I learned how to have a higher self-esteem, set boundaries, learn communication skills, get into spirituality. That was the start of my healing journey. It's like I needed to go down, like down, down to start going up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's one thing I've heard, and of course I don't know who the first person that coined it was, but your triggers are your treasures.
Holy shit. Yeah.
Meaning that what your triggers lead you to the gold mine of the stuff that's literally living in your body, that, you know, if you live through trauma, then, you know, your triggers are coming to hit on that chord, being like they're striking that chord, and so you feel that resonance. You're like, ouch, you know, it feels re-traumatizing again, but that stuff is going to stay in your body until we're able to, you know, to let it speak and flow and come out and transform it. So, and that right there is the gold mine. So your triggers is like, it's really painful, but that ultimately leads to the road where you can heal from it. we can also choose to, to bury it. But I think when we bury these things, they run our lives. They're
In the shadows.
unconsciously, they're in the shadows, so they're still with us. We just, choose not to see it. But then this comes out in different ways, right? This comes out in how we act in the world, in our relationships, and in what's reflected to us, and also in our bodies. So, we often have physical symptoms of these, or mental symptoms, emotional symptoms of these. They will come up. So, saying your triggers are your treasures, meaning that, the fact that you're triggered means that okay, that's something that I can work with. That's something to go see and be with, and can I bring presence to this, and be with this pain.
Yeah.
I think it's very important. There's an Afro-American woman who, her name is, I'm gonna screw that up, Yolanda Vincent. She said the word pain, so P-A-I-N, is pay attention in words now, which is really good. And I think I want to bring a nuance, not to what she says, but I think because I've been personally like on the spiritual path for like a very long time, and really in it to a point that I was maybe not sane anymore. And I've actually only recently I was like, you know what, this is way too much, and it's not doing what it should be doing, as in so I think I kind of want to give maybe a nuance, because I think a lot of culpability, or a lot of guilt will come out of when you feel that you can't say thank you to sexual assault. And I think, or saying, oh, I don't consider my triggers my treasures, and then you automatically think maybe, oh, you're a victim, and you're like, no, I think I gotta do a nuance. I've been victim of something, and I don't put my identity in it just because I can't say thank you to stuff like that. So I kind of want to put a nuance there, because I think I've personally lived this a lot of to a point that I was like, oh wow, I'm a mountain of guilt every morning, every day, walking, because, and I'm just constantly triggered actually with you're probably resisting, and that actually is becoming very self-harm. It's very I don't know, say c'est vraiment fouette, fouette, you're
En français, c'est
oui.
sûrement
Tu te
bilingue.
fouettes, you're whipping yourself with that own positive personal development thing, and I'm the priestess for personal development. I love it, and that's what I really want to do through my music actually. So actually to come into action with it, and because I come from a place where I overthink every fucking detail so much. So I'm coming to action and kind of saying, and it takes actually a lot of courage to say this, to say I don't actually consider my triggers as treasures, but I consider them for what they are, and I totally welcome them and observe them and say they're there. But I'm not gonna be the whole oh, I'm so thankful that all these men did what they did to me. Yeah. I'm gonna say this right now, hell fuck no.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I think it has to, I kind of want to say that, so that if there's another person out there that's listening and who's really like me, constantly oh my god, I'm not good enough even in my personal development, and I'm I kind of want to say hey girl, hey boy, yo babe, this is already so hard what you're going through, so maybe this is self-love, and this is what self-care is about, is accept yourself, and it's super cool if you're not Oprah or anything, and that you say thank you to everything. Or that
kind of gratitude, you can't force it. If you come to that place, great. If you don't, great also. You know, the fact that, trauma is not your fault, and that's, I think, an important nuance when people say these things. Oh, your trauma, your triggers are your treasures, but it's not saying that the trauma is your fault. It's saying the fact that something else in life is reminding you of what happened to you. That's kind of a reminder to kind of go down and be with the felt resonance of this. But I think it's also very, very important to mention that no, trauma is not your fault. It's not your fault.
And don't feel bad if you're not grateful and saying thank you every day about like what
Absolutely.
people did.
Especially if you don't mean it, if you don't like resonate with it.
I think so, yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, if you do, go ahead. Oh God.
If you do, then that might be a good sign. But if you don't, that's not a bad sign. Also,
Yeah.
I think in saying that trauma is not your fault, it leads to the other important half of that is that healing is your responsibility. So it's not your fault that you have trauma, but healing it is still your own responsibility. And also understanding that our society as it is very ill, and there's a lot of trauma and a lot of people, and
still a lot of violence too,
Oh my
a lot
God.
of aggressions every day, and it's like
I
we're
mean,
going through a sort of transition.
Mhm.
I just felt like sharing a word on
Yeah, go ahead.
healing, because we are using that word already, and like I want it, and I want to know what resonates with you guys, but I want the healing to be something really concrete, not just an abstract concept that we have, but like a technology, really, to heal our bodies, our emotions, our emotional bodies, energetic bodies, and physical bodies as well. It's like something that it's being in tune with the life force that lives through us. It's not something that's abstract, that's like vague. Like, and so one thing that I can name, and that kind of relates to what AMERO was sharing with us before we started recording, is to be seen is to be loved, and love heals, right?
Yeah.
So when we keep things in the shadow by ourselves, we're somehow whipping ourselves. But when we bring them to the community in a safe space, in a trusted community, which relates to the topic of today, well, that's when energy starts moving again, because we are individuals, but when we gather, we are a body of people. We're a collective body.
Oh, yeah.
And so when a cell, let's say an individual in the body, suffers from something and brings it to the body, and he's being received, he's being seen, heard, it will transform. And not only in that individual, but in all of the collective body as well, right? So
Yeah, it's even necessary.
yeah, so
Like,
that's why
people
we
speak up, and that's how it's gonna heal from all this toxic
Yeah.
that we're living in this life. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's
Which
why
is
you have all
basically
these
it.
groups, right? Aggression groups, like AAs, like, because it works. It's a
Yeah.
technology.
And these are
Right.
safe spaces to be able to feel these things. It's like,
Mhm.
okay, this is a container that we've all agreed upon that we're in here, and that's the definition of safe space. The safe space, to me, I think, is a place where you're allowed to feel your stuff, to get into this hurt space or this painful space, and be allowed to process it and not be shamed for the fact that you have this, and not be shamed for the fact that that you process it. And so a safe space is an important thing to have, at the same time understanding that the whole world out there isn't necessarily a safe space.
Yeah.
And safe spaces create this create a container for us to take that responsibility for our healing, and just like, okay, I'm processing my stuff, and in this space it feels safe to be able to do so. And that's important because trauma changes your nervous system, and when your nervous system is overloaded, you can get very sensitive to anything, and if you have triggers here all the time, you have no safe space to be able to actually process these things because you're bombarded all the time. That's not going to be helpful for you. That's just going to continue to re-traumatize you. So, that's really what I wanted to get into here today. Is like, how do we talk about the importance of safe spaces, and also the fact that triggers are leading you to your pain to be able to process it, and that safe spaces are important to do that. I don't know if that's what I just said, but
Yeah, I hear you. And I think to that I have to say that I feel like I found my home, but it's not what you would think. I found my home inside of myself. And when you find yourself in yourself, no one can take that away from you. So I think a lot of the world is always teaching you there's outside of you and everything is like provoking you and this, and it's like, yes, that's true. But I also believe when there is pain and there's suffering and there's triggers, there's also presence. Presence is always there. It always has been. It always will be. But we forget because we're caught up in like, this caught my eye, because we live in a society that teaches us one-pointed awareness. I'm going to just look at this and I'm going to see this and that's all I see. And we forget everything else that's around. So then that becomes our world.
That's how we control people, even.
Yeah.
I mean, you gotta control 7 billion people.
The thing is, what I definitely find interesting is that one of the things that I love to do is to put myself in a social group and then look at other people. So put myself as a third person.
Is that what you're doing right now?
I just like to listen
Welcome
and then after I talk.
Yes, thank you.
So what's interesting is that, you were mentioning that there's a lot, like, society's ill, right? But the thing is, society doesn't have the instrument, or the individual itself doesn't have the instrument to teach himself how to really, feel what happened during the trauma that this person had, and then after heal himself through that, right? So a lot of people, what's interesting is that I'm just popping names right now in my mind, and these are not necessarily people that would usually try to focus on themselves. It's usually what they would, they would look at other people that, let's say, have like celebrities or other people. So what they would do is they would look at their work and they would try to copy whatever they have done on the outside, right? So they would never try to focus on what happened really on the inner side of themselves. So at the end, what kind of confuses them is that they tell themselves, okay, I did these kinds of things, right? So I'll give you an example, right? Let's say someone gets overweight because of a previous trauma that he had in his life, right? And then all of a sudden he's trying to lose weight, but mentally he's not feeling well, right? And he doesn't know why. So at the end of the day, he does all these things and it doesn't change him at all, right? So I think what's interesting is that a lot of people are scared to go in these safe spaces because they don't have the right tools to help themselves to go into those. And I think it's...
They kind of need like a head start.
Yeah,
yeah. Read
and
this
yeah,
or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And sometimes when even you're trying to talk to someone and you're trying to get them to talk about what happened previously, it's very hard for them to
verbalize it.
Yeah, to verbalize, yeah.
Because we live in a society that's constantly telling people you're not good enough.
Yeah. And,
you know?
And then you see how the ego comes up.
And hide, and you shouldn't cry,
Yeah, actually.
Which is like a very...
what's crazy is that it's fascinating, and I think it's super interesting how, as a baby, and I'm seeing this from like cousins and aunts and like families that already have kids, when a kid cries, they literally say, and that's like their automatic response as, don't cry, this is going to be okay, right? But the thing is, it's a part of your nature to cry because that's the way that you release pain.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
And it's absolutely wrong. It's like sometimes, I'm at a family event and all of a sudden I see this little kid who like lost his toy or whatever, and he's crying and he goes to my uncle and he says, I lost my toy. And my uncle says, stop crying. Like, you're a man. And I'm like, what?
Toxic
why are you telling him to do this? Why are you telling him to do this?
That's the
Let him do what he wants. He's supposed to react this way.
He's a human being.
He's a human being.
Yeah.
And I just think that society has been brought up in so many wrong ways than what we were actually created for, and it's bad. And there's a lot of solutions, but it's
But what would be the opposite or a different way to deal with that and say, oh, I hear that you're really sad that you lost your toy. Okay, I'm here with you. Okay,
I see you. I
see
hear
you.
you.
Absolutely.
It's okay. You can cry.
Yeah.
It's like,
And then
just
you
like,
release
wow, I would also be sad if I lost my toy.
Yeah.
It's a really cool toy, man.
Yeah. That's sympathizing, and you can sympathize too, but not even. Just like, okay, I hear that you're, and then eventually, yeah, exactly. You're just holding that space. You're holding the presence. That's empathy. It's like, okay, I'm seeing you. Yes, I see you. I hear you. Take all that space, and in that, the child eventually will stop crying. He's not going to cry forever, but in this way, he's releasing that trauma. He's releasing the thing that he felt. When we say don't cry, we're bottling it up inside. We're saying, no, we can't let it out. And so
So just a quick thing, like again with technology or like, you know, the word emotion, right? I might have said this in past TRIBEcast, but energy in motion, emotion, right? So it wants to move, and we release it. We mentioned this, you know, like kids do this perfectly. Like they have this emotion that comes up, and all of a sudden they're somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
But when you said when bottle it inside, you know, that's when we become ill, you know, or we, you know, like we repress, we suppress parts of ourselves.
And then it comes from in the shadows and starts to, you know, dictate our lives. Yeah. And I just wanted to bring up the fact that we see in the animal world when, you know, ducks will get into a fight or whatever, and they go and they shake their wings, they shake it off, and they're good. You know, it's like something is hunted, whatever, you know, it's like a herd of antelope is hunted by a lion, one of them gets caught, gets eaten, you know, the other one's like, they shake it off, and they're fine. Right, but they've actually had to.
I don't know if they are. I mean, I've
well,
heard, like,
not the one that was
not
the one that was eaten, but you know, all the other ones that are just like, okay, well, we don't have to move anymore.
Keep going
like
their lives, right?
They keep going with their lives because they're able to
release
their trauma. They're able to release the stress in their body physically.
I don't know if that's completely the case. Like I know for elephants, like it takes. I read like it can take up to 20 years for elephants to mourn the death of one elephant.
Mm-hmm. But that's like humans too.
Yeah, so I would say like maybe we don't know. We're not in that antelope's heart.
Yeah, and maybe it's not the same like emotional charge either, like stress or as you say mourn. Maybe like it's more deuil.
Yeah.
Mourning is something different, I think, from a stressor.
Yeah, from losing your toy. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, something losing your toy. It might not be the same thing, or when you get into a fight, you know what I mean? It's like, okay, well, get your stuff out, and then after that, you're just like, okay, well, I let it out. I'm not holding that grudge on anymore physically. Mm-hmm. It's just like I was able to like actually shake it off, shake it out. I was able to cry it out. I was able to scream it out. You know, actually express our emotions, the energy in motion, get it out, move it.
Yeah, I think like in etymology. Emotion is emovere, and it means like literally you are, let's say you are in your canal, you're centered. Mm-hmm. And then emotion is you are moved from your center. That's what it means. You're actually like, you know, when you're like evicted, you're out. Yeah. Well, now it's the emotion. You're out of your own centeredness, if I could say. Mm-hmm. And I think that emotion is there for a reason, right? And I think that sometimes one of the best ways to actually get rid of that emotion, it's not the right term, but like, is to kind of just live it, you know? So like, and I know that for kids, when they cry, it's really out of recognition. They want to be recognized, like, look at how I'm pained by losing my toy. You know, sometimes like, kids won't actually cry, and then they look at the parent and they're like, oh, I have the opportunity to be seen, to be looked, I'm gonna cry. Yeah. And then they go bawl out, you know?
It's attention.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think you pay attention inwards and then you look at it.
So something triggers me here and I want to go back to Simon's uncle, right?
Yeah.
And toxic masculinity, because one of my secret goals with these podcasts is to transform manhood, right? Yeah. And I want to hold my share on this. And so to come back to Simon's uncle in that story of the last toy, well, maybe the man didn't have this space from his parents as well.
So
100%. So it triggers down from generation to generation.
Exactly. So that's why
absolutely 100%.
It transforms.
Yeah.
Or it transmits from generation to generation.
Yeah, absolutely.
So then, what this person needs, the uncle, is not more shaming, not more guilt. Yeah. It needs space. Mm-hmm. Also to connect with this part, the child inside, right? And my question is, and it relates to the topic again, but where are these spaces today where men can actually, you know, and I know there are more and more, but I want to kind of open up to this because it's the discussion that we have. So I was reading this article before coming here in Urbania, which is a magazine here in Montreal. La journaliste s'appelait Rose-Aimée Automne Témorin, that's like this big name. But anyway, it was about fatherhood, fathers who are on, let's say, divorce instance, and kind of relates to it, something we touched on our last TRIBEcast as well. The distress that these men go through, right? And they touch really like dense emotions, if you will, like anger, like sadness, of course, like the feeling of abandonment, or and yeah, I wanted to take the opportunity today to kind of arise this also in to our consciousness, to see where are the spaces where we can, as men, remember and kind of hold space for each other and kind of bring that energy and that back to life, right? And transform it without harming ourselves or without harming the others, right?
And that right there is another safe space, right? I'm trying to, bringing back these keywords. That's a safe space. This is a space that we can go into and say, and recognize that, hurt people hurt people. When somebody hurts you, they were hurt too somewhere down the line, and it's exactly. And it's not about releasing the person from the responsibility of their actions, but it's about understanding where it comes from, and taking our own responsibility for our healing. Coming back to the idea, trauma is not your fault. It's not your fault that somebody else traumatized you or did something to you, but your responsibility is to heal yourself. Is like, what do you do to heal yourself? And I think it's a collective responsibility also, to create these safe spaces that people could come in to have that kind of space to take the responsibility to do so. It's an individual thing and also a collective thing, because we can't just go and tell everybody, well, it's your responsibility, do what you will, but I'm traumatized all the time because I'm triggered all the time from everything outside, and it's not safe here. I don't have the space. I don't feel safe enough to process my stuff. So, creating safety to be able to process your stuff, and that I think is the space, I don't like saying balance too much, but the balance of personal responsibility and social responsibility for the safe spaces.
I think the only thing I'm going to say to add to what you're saying, and I hear what you're saying, is that I think one thing we do is what you're talking a lot about is space, creating space. For me, space is consciousness. They're to me, they're one.
Yeah.
And also for me, space comes from you going inside of yourself and being conscious and aware of what's happening. And then for me, what I've found now is that I'm just letting go. The most important words that I have learned for the whole year are 2 words: let go. So I've been letting go of like identifying with things. So things become your story. And you have a story, and I used to have a story, and I told it over and over again until my brain was wired into like my story, right? And then my mom, like recently wanted to see her. She's like, and I was reading a book that weekend that I went to see my parents, and it said remove the word my, because then it stops being yours and it becomes the story, and then it doesn't become a part of you anymore. It's there, I own it, I know it happened, but I'm no longer identifying with it so that it's not hurting me over and over. Because what we do is we'll have our story, and we'll let that story, you're the only animal on the planet that will punish ourselves over and over and over and over. And it's like, how do we stop? It's like, how do we stop? And it's like, well, create the space for you to stop it. And that's not only by going to a space, but also inside of you, because outside and inside like create each other.
Absolutely.
Very good.
But I think what's interesting is that before you were saying how can we create those safe spaces, right? And I think on a timeline of on society standards, I think at some point we had that, right? I think at some point there was a time in the world where men and women were able to be in touch with nature, were able to be in touch with themselves, right? But I think at some point when, I'm going way too far with this probably, but with politics and with
construct.
Personal interest.
Civilization.
Exactly. With civilization, as soon as that came in, and as soon as that engraved into like people's mind as like capitalism and like democracy and all of the all those other things. Yeah, exactly. And that kind of like everything dissipated, right? So I think right now it's interesting that we're coming up to like, I'll put it this way, some kind of new era. Where like, you know, people are more like, oh wow, there's something going on, right? So I think it's getting pretty interesting. The more it's happening, the better it's becoming.
So the word, just a quick thought here, but the word "let go," I was kind of reactive to that in the past years, but I started using, and I think it's the same thing. We're talking about the same thing, deconstruction, right? So we have this construct, individual construct of the personality, individuality of the I or the my, as you said. And then we have the social construct as well, which, what is it to be a man? What is it to be a boy? What is it to be a woman, a girl, whatever, you know? And so, yeah, I think that part of the process right now that we have to go through is deconstruction. Because we kind of arrived to the dead hands that, you know, like we see how sick this world is and how sick our culture is. And it brings me back to, because in the article that I mentioned on Urbania, you know, the woman was saying, the journalist was saying that these men, these father that are kind of lost and are losing their kids to the moms, blah, 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 and they're kind of resentful and angry. But they don't go towards the institutions, right? It often kind of resists that as well. So to me, it kind of rings a bell that it's not going to happen on this end. I mean, in the politics or in the, whatever, the medical system or something like that. It needs to be a cultural shift. I don't know how this resonates with you.
Definitely. I think it's a shift in consciousness.
That goes with social construct. I'd fine. I really prefer how you say it, but I would say how. Well, I'm gonna jump on what you said, Simon. Is like I find up to this point, I mean, you know, just when we came to like, oh, we've invented guns, and then now we can colonize some people, and you're like, yeah, okay, but what's the point? And but we kind of, it's like, but I mean,
we can own the land.
No, but this very first level of thinking is like, I'm stronger, and therefore I'm gonna survive, which is a very survival thing. But in the end, it's like, you know, even here in now what we call Canada, and it's actually because people had been conscious enough to say, we're not gonna get into this violence where these people come with guns and that we're gonna just get and that's how now it's an unceded land, right? And I think I would also say like a lot of women are unceded lands, you know, and a lot of men as well. And so all this kind of war that happens and whatever, it's kind of like a way of thinking that we've had, which is like human being 1.0, version 1.0. And I think I'm actually really down. I've been thinking about this year of like, okay, to get into like version 2.0, we'll have to like stop desiring like this whole physical thing as well of like owning and everything, and just kind of, okay, actually now what real technology is for me, I'm actually writing on technology, and it's very far from being electronic. And it's compassion. Like one of my like what I want to write about is about the technology of compassion and how that's going to bring us really further. And I think even the United Nations, somebody said that, now it sounds really vague, I'd have to find that again, but yeah. And I think like, so coming back to like how men are brought up and everything, it's very toxic, and it sucks because after there's so many effects that come from that, you know, whether it be, I mean, we're now gonna just say those big words, you know, but whether like they commit suicide, whether they're violent, or, you know, towards other people, and or towards themselves. I mean, suicide is probably that. And like for the longest of time, I'm like, oh, I really hate having the gender education that I've had as a woman, because my gender education is like not saying anything to not displease anybody else, always put the man first, including his desire. And it took like almost 3 decades to say, oh, I'm actually allowed. And it's so hard, and with such a paradigm shift, and to say, oh, I'm allowed to actually not serve somebody. That's really weird. And I find it's insane to have thought that for 30 years. And so all this feminine, gendered education that we give to women, like, serve, be nice, and whatever, there's also this thing of, like, how we're supposed to take care of other people and how we have to develop our emotional intelligence a lot. Like, even if it's just, like, just saying sorry, or, like, if you're on the sidewalk, we automatically feel like somebody's coming up, oh, I'm gonna toss a bit on the right so this person goes further, you know? And there's all this thing of, like, being more conscious about your surrounding, about the other people, emotional surroundings, and the emotional environment of other people. And where I'm going with that is, so it's something that's annoying when it's imposed, but I also find that there's a lot of, like, good values in that, meaning, like, if we would teach men to, like, oh, you can, well, first you gotta take care of yourself and you gotta take care of others. That's maybe what's lacking in like the gendered education given to women, is that we are not taught to take care of ourselves. We're taught to serve others. So, but it's like, and then for men it's like, oh, you can put yourself first, but don't cry. So it's like, well, put yourself first, but you're not the only one in the universe, and there's other people around, and there's other things, like, you're allowed to cry and just cry and get it out. And I think if only, like, for example, if men could just feel so much more at ease and not actually have a panic attack because just because they're like, oh my god, I feel I would cry, but I'm not allowed because that would either be weak like a woman, which is very hurtful, or also, like, that'd be gay, you know? And they could just, I'm sure they could just live so much more easy, like, more easy about, like, being a man, you know?
But even men are taught to be providers. They're supposed to provide for other people. So yes, there's a certain,
On a physical way, like,
yeah, exactly,
bread, money, car, like, I don't know. Yeah.
right. But we're still taught. So it's not just women that are taught this, but to take care of others, right? We're all it's like, oh, I have to take care of the needs of other people. I have to
Material
watch
needs.
out.
Yeah.
Yes, but in general, so humans are taught to take care of the needs of others, and so then we expect that others will take care of our needs. And when our needs are not met, then it creates this resentment and violence and critiques and judgments and blames that, oh, like, this, there's something wrong. Is like, I'm resentful towards that person because they didn't take care of my need, but I didn't name it. But I'm supposed to take care of them. They're supposed to just take care of me. Like, no, this is where personal responsibility comes in. Like, I'm responsible for my experience, right? So, like, these are my needs. How do I ask for my needs towards others, as opposed to being like, I'm just supposed to take care of the other person's needs, and they're just supposed to take care of mine. Yeah, but if we don't say it, we're not mind readers, you know?
Yeah, but we're also not taught, like, I think no one goes to school and takes a class on how to, like, argue properly or how to communicate your point
even,
across. Like, just this week, literally, I was reading a book called, like, The Ultimate Confidence. And, like, in that book, it's like, this is how you argue. I'm like, wow, it only took me 33 years.
That's a long
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm kidding, because, I mean, I think I've been able to get my point across, but I feel like it's always the fine-tuning that you get. And also the, like, when I was reading this, it said, focus on one thing. Don't use blaming language. Things I've already read, but it was like, I need to hear it over and over and over until now I've come to a point where I have conversations and the way I talk to people is 100% different where it was a year ago, because I realized from 1 to 5, you're in a program. Your body's running on theta. You're a kid and you're learning everything from your environment. Then you have a different brainwave that develops between 5 and 7, your conscious mind. And you have these two minds running around. Your conscious mind, which is like a 10-bit processor, and your subconscious, which is a million-bit processor. And you're like literally trying to integrate yourself, and then you're like, oh, let me eat this pizza. And then 10 minutes later, you're like, I feel really shitty for eating that pizza. Why did I even do that? And it's like, oh, wait, my body has an entire memory and a program. And that's part of the problem. Those triggers are your memory, and they don't even come from you. Like, literally, they come from society.
Yeah, they're imprints of your parents and your society around you when you're, between 0 and 7 years old. You know?
Generations as well, yeah.
Yeah.
You have, like...
And the collective unconsciousness, exactly.
Yeah. and
Right.
transgenerational trauma, right? It's like,
Yeah.
you know, my parents' wounds that got them from their parents' wounds. That got, you know, it's like that's, you know, our wounds are deep. You know what I mean? And you know, a lot of people come from different backgrounds that have, you know, trauma, so much trauma from different places in different ways, but it's very traumatic. And so like the whole world is just like on edge, or just like,
But
you know,
it can be good though.
hot and
Well, it's getting it out.
Yeah.
I always
It's
feel
getting
like
out,
I
it's
see it as a
transforming it.
wound. There's pus. Sorry, it's not cute. Pus. Get out
It's
the
real,
pus. Oh, the pus. Or you're still bleeding. Oh, it's still bleeding. And then you're like, okay, I'll just, you know, hold my finger. It takes 2 minutes for the blood to stop. Okay. But it's still bleeding for 2 minutes. So it needs to kind of come out. And I think that's what this unconsciousness and like pain and trigger, it's always about getting the stuff out.
Yeah.
Yes. And
So that you can actually close the
Mhm.
wound and be good at one point. And actually really, I'm really bridging that with like what we were talking about, evolution. Like, because you were saying like men provide for the material thing and everything, and we're so much in this paradigm where it's all about like acquiring like physical possessions because of comfort. And I think we'll have to kind of move to like human being 2.0 and then say, oh, it's inside. You know, I'm kind of linking with what you said of like, oh, I found my home, it's really inside. Like, and I mean, it's so hard, this thing, to actually really access. And I couldn't even say like what are all the ties that are keeping me from doing that completely, you know? But it's true, like it's not about longing for material desire, although still accepting like, oh, I need a roof over my head. That's kind of better, you know. But actually longing for, you know, oh, what is it to be a human being? Well, having this experience, and there's a lot of like invisible things, and about the interior life actually.
Something I want to bring up, because we didn't, I think something I wanted to kind of argue with that is that, you know, you were talking about like how some people have to let go, some, I guess, of their emotions, if I got that right, or was letting
let
it
go of your story.
Letting go of the story
Or of the
that you have.
of the past, right?
Yeah, of the past.
Right. So what's actually really interesting is that, so what's interesting is that some people won't, you know, they'll tell you let it go, and for some others it's too hard to let go, right?
Yeah.
So I think what's interesting is that a while ago I had an issue, and I actually came up to Mitch, and what's interesting is that I was telling him how like I had the system where if I had an issue I would let it go, right? So I would try to find a way to slap that issue, put it under a rug, and I would completely let it go, right? But the issue
and then
is that,
life came and
exactly.
came,
So
knocked
life
on
came
your door,
back,
it's like, hey,
exactly,
wait,
and he
you
was
said
like, no,
this.
no, no, no. One
said this a
second,
few
we're
days
gonna
ago.
talk, you and I. So something that I think should be a part of the process of letting it go. It's also a part of like coping with the situation itself, right? So it's coping with the emotions, putting yourself as in your central self and saying, this is fine. What are you feeling right now? It's great. And it's so funny because the way that he told me this, it was extremely hard at the beginning to do it. But when you're taught it well, it makes you feel at peace, and this is when you're actually able to let something go with on the inner side of yourself. Right?
Because you felt it.
Exactly, because you felt it, and because you've experienced that trauma, you know the emotions about it, right? But are you gonna let it go, or are you gonna put it under a rug and just, you know, go on with your life until something else is gonna happen 20 years down the line, and your kids might be here, or I don't know who else is gonna be in front of you, but you might just, you know, be transparent about it and then give it to the other person, right? So actually, something else that's interesting is that a lot of parents have trauma, and they don't cope with the whole situation. So what they do is that they let it go, they put it under the rug, and they pass it on to their kids, right? And it's interesting to see this because these kids have those issues, but they kind of fix it on their own, but in a very different way that the parent was never able to realize how to fix it, right? And I think it's crazy because like it's those systems that have been created by parents or by generations that creates the society of illness
Yeah.
that is around.
But
you
I
know?
think like you don't have to argue with me. The thing is, I agree with you.
No, it's not
I think it was just talking about maybe
I was
the,
It's
gonna
not even
say-
I think it was talking about the words, right? When we say
Yeah,
let
I
go,
think-
let go
I
is very
think-
easily, it's easily said like,
There's so
oh,
many
Yeah.
definitions.
let go,
There's so
Yeah,
and
I
just put it
guess-
to the side.
I guess I
put
should
it
have
aside.
clarified there. What I meant by letting it go is once you felt it,
Yeah.
once you've
Yeah,
gone
exactly.
into it, because once you feel it, then you can let it go.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't, if you don't feel it, you can't heal it.
No,
I'm all
yeah,
about
you're
that,
right.
like-
But
Don't
you
fake
don't,
it, yeah.
But you don't have to.
Yeah.
You don't even have to think of letting it go. It leaves you because you've processed it,
That's
right?
right.
That's the thing.
Transformed, yeah.
Feeling it,
Yeah, it's
feeling it,
transformed.
feeling it allows you to process it, and the processing allows the transformation. And once it's transformed, like it's gone. So I do think it's important to to recognize that these words. Okay, yes, we can use the word let go, but understanding that some people take that word and be like, oh, okay, well, I'm just going to let go of that, and I'm not going to process it because it's too much.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's uncomfortable. I'm
It's
just going to
more
do
like
that. Like,
running
no,
away
it's like,
from.
Exactly.
yeah, and it's not running away from it. So letting it go, what you meant when you're talking
Yeah.
about letting it go, I think is about it processing it and letting it through and allowing it to transform. And that's the cool thing with words is that we all have our different ways of explaining these things,
Miscommunication
of saying
is-
them,
oh.
and another person will take it in a different way and will say, oh, but you said this, and it's like, oh, but I was coming from a different place, right?
But
And so
words is a
communication-
construct. Words is part of the construct.
Yeah,
What's
that's
a
the thing.
signpost? Yeah.
And words are signposts. Words are like, okay, go behind the words.
Yeah,
And I've
yeah.
often-
The signpost is like, that's not me. It's Eckhart Tolle. He's like, it's a signpost, But I kind of want you to go into the city where that signpost is bringing you to. Yeah.
And that's how I felt often in life in general. I'm like, my words, the words aren't so important. It's what's behind the words that's important. And so sometimes I don't think I get things across very well. I'm like, I'm so not articulate and doesn't really work well and doesn't come out great, and there's a bunch of ums and words that are kind of all over the place. But some people, when they're really listening, they say, oh no, you're very articulate, I get it. But that's because they're not listening to the words I'm saying. They're listening to what's behind the words.
Yeah.
They're listening to what fuels the words. They're going to what I'm pointing to. Like, well, that's why you understand, because you're not stopping at the words that I'm saying.
Yeah.
You're going to the essence that I mean behind it. And I think that's not everyone is able to do that. A lot of our society we take words and we run with it because we take them on our own experience, what we think they mean, as opposed to, okay, I'm really listening to you and being with what you're saying. And if you use a word that, I wouldn't use that word, whatever, I'm like, it doesn't matter. I'm going to hear you, and now I'm seeing the essence of what you're saying. So now I really understand, and I'm not misunderstanding because I'm taking one or two your words or sentences and running away with it.
Here's a question. Maybe I don't know how much time we have left, but like
5
maybe
minutes converse.
a final question
Really?
regarding the words and regarding the concepts and like. So in this article in Urbania magazine, right, about the fathers that get their kid taken away, the journalist went to Facebook groups, actually, like fathers Facebook group, and that's where she led her investigation. And Facebook groups are like words, right?
But also
of
maybe men
communication-
expressing themselves.
It is men expressing
I think
themselves
that's
with
important.
words. And so my question is, and I'm curious to hear you guys about this, but
Yeah, 'cause
is
we would have to say-
internet, Facebook groups, a safe space for us
Wow.
to transform energy?
Ooh.
Is it the best place to be heard? And I'm kind of je suis un peu biaisé en posant la question, because I have
the edge.
Oh, we can already tell. That's okay though.
But yeah, I mean, it's a real question that I ask myself too. It's like there's so much information right now on the internet, and people can just be on the computer screen and kind of putting those words out there, because obviously there's an emotion behind the words, right? And they're feeling something and they want to be heard, and as we said, and they want to be seen, and so they're going to try to encrypt that into some sort of technology or some sort of forum, like on the internet. And so, what do you guys think? Is it a safe space for us to transform energy?
Well, I think first of all, safe space has to be determined by certain factors that have been agreed upon beforehand. But I think the way how this goes, can you imagine, like, we're 7 billion people, and then how we heal ourselves collectively, where we should be together. I find internet in that manner, in that regard, is really like a sick symptom of this society. So of like, oh great, the only way we can communicate is behind a computer. It sucks. Fucking sucks even. And I think we're not even still connecting. I think a lot of people, this even happened like in the most recent years where like now most like everybody has a smartphone and everything, and just people don't even call so much and talk, like hear my friend's voice or whatever. And they're all about like, just Facebook me. And I'm like,
just text me.
And it's also sometimes it's like huge conversations on text. And you're like, but there's 90% of what you say is nonverbal. So, I mean, you're not hearing the tone, and then people are just like, oh, I'm going to text further about how to explain myself. But really, I think I really find it's sad and ill. You know, like, it's sad because there's a lot of people that this is their only way out, in a way. And
but I think the fact that
it's still better than nothing.
Exactly.
I mean,
it is a way. Yeah. It is a way out, and I think it also it allows us to stay connected to groups and to communities that are outside. It's one of the ways that we can connect our webs. You know, and we're doing this TRIBEcast to connect a bunch of different people that are wanting a new culture for the world. It's like all these tribes. So the internet. This is where we're posting this TRIBEcast so that people can hear all around the world. This is where this is a way to get information across the world in a quick manner. I think the dangerous part is relying on it as the only way, and putting down or putting less importance on actual human gatherings where we're here and I'm here with all of you in person. I can see your bodies, you know what I mean? We're here, and there's all this emotion, this felt part, this energetic component that is lost in transmission through digital interfaces.
And I guess that my point is also all of that trolling, that concept.
So I think, like, just to take it back a step, okay, this is my viewpoint, and a lot of this has triggered me, so I'm just gonna let
wow.
Yes,
let me just like lay it down for you how I view things, and I view like we're all part of each other. Like, essentially, whatever the person is hurting inside of you, it's something you need to look at in your shadow so that it's healed, so next time that trigger is not coming up for you. And that's the personal responsibility thing you were talking about. So I think for me, you have to understand that life is almost like a dream. Like, we're all in a dream. Like, everybody's in their own head. And like, the moment you're in your head and you put something out on the internet, if the person has a trigger, they're going to respond to that because they're thinking you're triggering their trigger. So it's like a trigger to a trigger, like domino situation happening, right? Where I feel like what I've learned is I can go into a bathroom and have a conversation with someone that's not there. I let it out peacefully and nicely. It's out of my body. It's out, not in. I can write a letter, and I'm good. And then when I'm hanging around people like you guys, then I'm fully present because I want to observe your light. To me, we're all light, and there's light coming out of you right now, and I'm not going to get that on a computer. The computer's not going to be shining me your light,
Amen!
Yes.
Holy crap! I think it's a means to an end. Sorry, I just want to say that. It's okay. Because you said it's a way, and I'm like, you are right. But I think if people treat it as the end point, it's not. And people are actually not going to heal. Healing is like collectiveness.
And it's part of the stress, and I've done it myself, It's like, oh, I want to share something. I feel like sharing something. And it's like the only place where, like, meaningful, so to speak, where I can put it is on my fucking Facebook wall, and that triggers me,
Interesting. So for me, I feel like...
And it's not, it happened to me in the past, and I know it's happened to a lot of people too, right?
Yeah.
I hear you, but I also feel like perhaps you're looking a lot outwards, and maybe something you can look at is inwards as well, because you know, a place of safe space, where again we're going back to the outward. 80% of healing is from inside out, not outside in.
And it's from the feeling of these things. Where on
Exactly.
Facebook we're talking about words. It's talking to our mental.
It's still talking
Usually
to the
much
mind
more
and not the
much more than
consciousness.
more than the body, much more than the emotional body, which is where where our wounds are stored, is in our emotional body and our physical body. That's where the magic happens.
Yeah.
And we're able to dive into that. And so when the internet is through words, it's talking to our intellect, our mental mind.
It's
It's like it's
the mind.
missing all of the
So
parts.
Einstein has this quote, and he says, you cannot solve a problem at the level of mind that created it.
Oh yeah,
So you have to not solve it at the level of mind. It has to
Definitely.
be solved at the level of consciousness and presence. And presence can
Sorry, and I didn't want to cut you off, but I'm like, okay, I want to.
yeah.
When you're done this, I'm like, I'm trying to.
How do you think presence arises in you?
Creation, art is what comes right now.
And what about your body?
Body sensations, definitely. Listening to
When you go inward and you pause and you stop, what happens?
You mean right now?
Yeah.
I just want to take a deep breath. I mean, yeah. What we're doing right now is a lot of intellectually interpretation as well. And it has its place. But to me, what you're referring to is more getting in the experience.
It's not life itself.
In the just do
Exactly.
it, right? In the
moment,
substance.
The moment being becomes you, all problems dissolve anyway.
I know.
Right?
I just don't want to fall into this, and I get you, we're talking the same thing. I just don't want to dive in fully, because some also people, to come back to trolling, will appeal for violence and will share all of this hatred that they have that will trigger other people, and that can become also contagious. And I'm like, of course, I want to be a preacher of love. I want to be, resonate love myself, and I don't want to, resonate with that hatred. But at the same time, I don't want to just, as we mentioned earlier, just put it as if it doesn't exist, right?
Absolutely, I agree with you 100%.
But
so love and hate only exist because one exists, the other exists. If we didn't have hate, we wouldn't have love. So
actually, there's
they
not
are
really
one.
hate. There's absence of love.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah.
That's right.
Oh,
Like,
It's
hate
actually
is-
girl.
no, but even like
I don't know
My
it.
girl.
This is even a physical thing. Like there's actually cold doesn't exist. It's just absence of warmth.
Exactly.
Thank you,
And the absence of
Secretary.
Darkness
to
doesn't
teach-
Yes,
exist.
right?
It's just absence
And
of
I
light.
have a message for you. You are love.
Yeah.
I'm taking it in.
And I want to hear from Simon now, because we haven't heard from him in a while, and since this question, I'm like, I've been
Well,
getting
Jonathan,
things from you, and
take
I
it
want to
in.
hear from you.
Let's
So
hear Simon.
let's hear. We have a few minutes. We have a couple minutes left before we.
So, no, I'm more like the listening type, and then I talk back because I like to absorb whatever kind of information I get, and then I make an appearance on it. So, I think what's interesting with your question is that you're pointing a fact that touches everyone into an interpersonal level, right? So, something with me is that whenever I ask a question, I have to put emotions with it. When I really want to mean something and I really want to describe something. So when I go on Facebook, so okay, let's put it this way, right? Let's say, it's gonna be interesting. Let's say I want to ask a question about, I guess, so what interests me a lot is the female psychology, right? Because I think it's very complex and a lot of things, right? So I follow this group where I ask similar questions and people have similar interests, right? So whenever I ask a question, the question sometimes is not definitely, it's not perceived as I want to be perceived, and the answers are very different.
Yeah.
You gotta let go of the result.
Exactly. So the thing is that I'm just like, you know what, forget about it, right? Or sometimes even the thought in my mind of whatever it is, even if it's not on that subject or if on something else, I just think that sometimes it depends the person, right? But emotions can never be put on
That's right.
something on the web, because the thing is you can describe it, but you can make someone feel with it, right?
With
so
words.
The thing is, there's videos, and then there's
videos, maybe
descriptions, right?
are closer to.
But I think the best thing is when you're in front of someone, because there is auras and there's vibing and there's
but then,
il y a l'absence de quelqu'un within a moment, you know what I mean? And it's very different. Whenever I read something on Facebook, I'm like, okay, whatever, right?
But then you can be in front of someone also wearing masks and not being in your true selves.
Absolutely.
So
it depends on intention too. So there are some people whose words you might read on Facebook, and it so resonates because you feel, their resonance that they put into it. Just because that's strong too, so that helps. Meanwhile, of course, the ideal is being face to face. I can see you, I can touch you. There's all this here. There's this humanity there. Next is possibly video. Video conferencing or seeing videos. It's the next best thing to that. And audio on the telephone. That you're getting the voice, you're getting something. You're able to do that. And after that, you're losing more and more when you get to words. So it doesn't mean that you can't transmit anything. It just means that it's much more difficult to transmit, and it means that when you're trying to transmit something, you have to put much more into it, much more presence, much more effort into really transmitting your feeling and transmitting your presence through those words. Yeah. It takes a lot more because the channels become small. When I'm here, the channel is this wide to pass through. You can't see in this podcast, but I'm putting my hands wider than my shoulders. But it's wide. It's approximately huge. And then next down, we're getting to video conferencing. Video conferencing, it goes through cables. It's like, oh, okay, well, it's much smaller. It takes much less bandwidth. And we get to audio, it takes less bandwidth, and we take text, which takes much less bandwidth. And we're saying goodbye to Justyna. Thank you so much, Justyna, for being with us.
We're getting
to
bientôt close and on va juste prendre une pause ici. On va faire une coupure au montage.
Je me suis dit, attends,
Did you pause it here? Did you pause it right now?
No.
Okay, you're going to pause.
Au montage.
But it was okay when we said, okay, well, we're going to say goodbye to Justyna.
So in my mind, I was like, is he going to edit it? Is he not going to edit it? Like, please.
Well, the part where we could say, okay, we're just saying goodbye to Justyna, we can keep that.
You are loved.
I think,
There's nothing for you to do.
Okay, this is a real pause?
Now.
Yeah.
Well, if you have to go, we have to run to the bathroom, then do that.
I think we really
I think you're pretty, you're still very good.
Third-person views.
It takes a lot.
You know what I mean by that? So what I'll
juste faire un petit wrap-up.
So,
Et finir avec une chanson.
I'll give an example,
aussi,
okay?
But we're on a break
podcast
right now.
What were you saying?
One of the things that he
so
says
huge,
is that he
but
says, have you ever looked at a parent?
I think it's very.
Whenever he wanted to do something when he was younger, but he never did it, he kind of gives it to his kid.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think
Right?
it's very
So
hard
let's
to,
say there's like Mozart, right? He always wanted to play piano, but he never did. So what he's gonna do is that he's gonna send his kid to a piano school, do it. But the issue is that he's never able to learn exactly what Mozart did and how Mozart was in real, right? Because they're focusing on the outside runs instead of focusing on the inner foundation
Of the creativity that goes through you. It's like, oh, I can be creative and express that instead of like,
So I think
I should be able
just-
to do this, I should be able to
Exactly.
do that. That's another great conversation. I'll bring it up to on the record. This is on the record, but it'll be cut off. But I'll bring it on the record back up again. That there's so much to discuss here, and there's so much that I was hoping to even dive into a little bit. That I was like, oh, we didn't have time. We could easily continue this discussion for another hour and still
sure,
touch
absolutely.
on like this much.
I feel like we can be done at midnight at this point.
Yeah,
It's an art though to kind of navigate through topics and not going always back to something like to unfold ideas.
They'll probably go
Yeah,
faster
it's
ways.
an art. That,
It is, and the thing is that I was like, oh, there was another idea of, for example, that thing that I was going to talk about the
Listen to Marissa here. She's like, the only problem with society is one.
I was unpacking what this guy said when we
we said goodbye to Justyna.
Yes.
Bye, Justyna. Have a safe trip.
Yes, thank you, Justyna, for coming and being part of this. We have to wrap this up. We could have spoken for so much longer.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Oh, one thing that I just did want to mention quickly
Yes.
is most of the things you mentioned, video conferences, audio, whatever,
Yeah.
is in the digital world, right?
Yes.
And one thing I started doing and I encourage anybody who listens to this and you guys to do, is journaling in the analog world.
Yes.
Right?
Oh yeah.
Because if
Oh,
it
yeah.
turns out to be a book sometime, well, people will get another feeling, another grasp, you know. And it's not, you don't read a book the same way that you read a Facebook post, right? So
No.
just wanted to throw that out there.
Yes.
Journaling.
Thank you.
Stay strong, analog world.
Yes.
Stay strong.
C'est excellent. Good.
Yeah. So thank you, everyone. I'm glad that we spoke about this, and that was.
Thank you for inviting us.
Yeah.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for being
Thanks
here.
for
This was really great. I didn't expect it to go in all the places that it did, but that's also what I did expect. It was that it to be alive and that it would just flow, you know. And at first we were talking about, oh, where is it going to go? What's exactly the plan? I'm like, it's going to come alive, and so I'm really happy about where it went and how we all participated. So thank you. On that note, we're going to have one last song from AMERO. So,
Thank
AMERO?
you. Can I say? Can I introduce this song a little bit?
Absolutely. Go
Like,
ahead.
not
Yes.
More than 2 minutes, folks. I'll just say this. I think my artwork, it's really to get the pus out of a wound.
Mm-hmm.
And because I'm finding, like, maybe I'm wondering if, like, men listen to this and then they feel triggered or like, no, I didn't do this or anything. It's more about, like, I think we got to get a lot of the pus that we have in this collective wound and to kind of get it out. And this is what my song, its intention is, and really on to healing.
Excellent.
But it's talking about stuff that's not necessarily nice on the ways to it.
Interesting.
There you go.
Sometimes that's what we need too. Just like you have to feel the feelings, and this is your way to do so. So let's hear you.
So thank you, and thank you for opening to this type of music.
Yeah.
It's not like, yeah. Thank you. I hear you talk about honor killings in the East, but do you talk about honor killings in the West? I see you busy with honor killings in the East, but do you care about honor killings in the West? You're keen to proclaim honor killings in the East, but do you overlook honor killings in the West? There's honor killings in the East, there's honor killings in the West. Where's your neighbor after his last feat? He could be your local bartender or chief, a police officer, a DJ manager, life thieves. Where did his wife go? Is she back on her feet? Is she out of the hospital? He's still a good guy though. He's still a good guy. He's still a good guy though. He's still a good guy. I hear you talk about honor killings in the East, but do you talk about honor killings in the West? I see you busy with honor killings in the East, but do you care about honor killings in the West? You're keen to proclaim honor killings in the East, but do you overlook honor killings in the West? Funny how you talk about honor killings in the East. You seem worried, but not for the good reason. Cause even though it's problematic to really have it at heart, it don't seem when it happens here. You don't even read the art, you turn the page. Ain't got no time to waste, stupid little bitches who didn't get it. As if it were me, long time I would have been gone. As if it were me, long time I would have been gone. I got brains, you see, I got brains, you see. Your sisters in the East, your sisters in the West, your sisters in the South, your sisters in the North, your sisters in the East, your sisters in the West, your sisters in the South, your sisters in the North. He's still a good guy. He just wanted to murder his wife. Nothing fly. The next one after that one guy. Oh, and your neighbor, how he lived. when he heard you yelling, asking if I was still alive. Oh, such good times. Oh, such good times. Oh, such good times. Oh, such good times. Fucking her head and her pussy at the same time. Oh, those good old times. Mate, remember when I asked if her wife was still alive? How we laughed. How we laughed. Merci.